Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Power Behind Open-Ended Questions in the Classroom, presented by Dr. Jessica Fudidadio.
Hello, I want to be sure you can hear me. I did have to move into a different location, so can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you very well. Thank you.
Perfect, okay. All right, so first I want to say thank you very much and good afternoon. Today's webinar is on the power behind open-ended questions in the classroom. So we are going to talk a little bit about how, not only in the classroom, but also just in general, how open-ended questions can make a difference within a conversation through reflective practice as well. So if you did see my webinar last time, this will kind of connect to that in the fact that we will be continuing to extend our understanding of reflective practice and the decisions that we make. And the importance of being open-ended with our questions to learn more and obviously to build those relationships with others. I'm also going to be going through an actual read aloud with you and how this read aloud, what I would do to get students to think a little bit more critically. So we'll get into that later, but let's go ahead and get started with the idea of this mirror on the wall, right? Self-reflection. We're always reflecting on ourselves to try to help ourselves grow and become more capable, more able to be active in our everyday life and looking in the mirror and knowing where we want to go. Reflective practice actually helps us get there. But interestingly, I'm going to share a video with you and then I'm going to talk with you about this. And I do find it to be very true at so many levels. So as you watch this today, I just want you to think about what this, give me 1 second here as I'm going through, 1 second. I'm just pulling up the video now, but I want you to think about whenever you look at this video, kind of this idea of being stuck and problem solving and how maybe asking more open-ended questions and being more reflective can get us through something like the event that I'm going to show you here in a second. So hang tight with me. And hopefully you are able to see my screen okay. I think that's a yes. As long as I don't hear no, I know that's a good thing. So here we go.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I'm moving to the music. Step to the beat. I woke up today, canceled all my plans, and I stepped right outside with my guitar in my hands, and the notes became alive as the sound caressed the air, and I kicked it up a notch as I strolled without a care, 'cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile.
Okay, so we are back. Hopefully you can see my PowerPoint okay right now. I'm going to assume if I don't hear anything, that means you can. So here we are. We have a couple people, they're taking an escalator, right? It's an everyday type of thing, and the escalator stops. And never is there problem solving or anything like that that occurs, or even questions or conversation between the woman and the man to discuss how can we get off this. And then kind of going through that process of figuring it out. So, you know, the idea here, and the reason I showed that video, of course, there's many things, like I said, it could be used for, but in this situation, problem solving, in order to do that, we have to teach our students what that looks like. One way to do that is through conversation and truly just kind of getting the thought process. And remember, with thought, there's background information and prior knowledge that each of your students has. When that occurs, when a problem occurs, they're going to use that to figure out what to do. So what that means is how you might solve a problem may not be how they do. And so we have to be cognizant of that. But at the same time, we need to help them in kind of figuring out what the right thing is to do. Right, in quotation marks, obviously. In order to do that, we ask them questions and kind of help them through that process. So with that being said, with problem solving, with open-ended questions, we are asking students to reflectively think. In order for us to do that, we have to be reflective in nature as well. So in front of you, you see two simple definitions of reflection. Okay, and I'm not going to read these. You can kind of take a look at them. One's from the Free Dictionary, and one is from Webster's Dictionary. Now, technically, as a researcher, we would never use just dictionary definitions. But at the same time, I think when we look at this, look at how, honestly, like, confusing, I guess, these definitions are. So really, what is reflection? And if you were at my last webinar, like I said, I kind of explained it there, but I'm going to explain it now again so that we were all on the same page for this presentation. So to be reflective is to create understanding to the question, why? By the way, open-ended question is the question why, right? So we can, so for example, I can say to you, did you have a good day? Your answer is going to be yes or no, okay? And then however you answer that, I might say, if you say no, why didn't you have a good day? And now I'm going to make you think about, why didn't you have a good day? What happened? And then have you share more with me. But anyway, in reflective practice, it's the question why. It's like something happens in front of us, just like that escalator situation, and we sit back and we say, why did this happen? And what am I going to do about it now, right? So we ask the question why. It goes into our brains. We compare it, like I said, with problem solving, to our prior knowledge and our background information. So we start to try to figure it out. Then, right before it starts to get too critical, we actually push it out and make a difference. We make a change of some kind. So that way that situation might get better. Or so our learning process can become better, right? So that's what you want to do. You don't want to let it just linger. That's not reflection. That's just being critical. So that is an important thing to say. So technically, the propel is the end, the propel of your thought and your action after, that is the end of a reflective process, okay? So the last bullet there just says, in other words, it is taking the time to look within one's own mirror to find answers to questions that an onlooker may not be able to answer. So with anything that we do in teaching, we should be, and even as a parent, we're thinking about the metacognitive nature of what our kids or our students are thinking. So what is metacognition exactly? Why is it important? Is it? And how does metacognition fit into student learning? Now, if you were with me right now and I actually had you to answer these questions for me, I would be interested to hear the collaborative nature of your answers. But technically, when people say, metacognition, and if you're a teacher, you're thinking, it's thinking about thinking. And I still sit back and say, what in the world does that mean? So for the purpose of this presentation, metacognition relates to the following. It's the knowledge of your thoughts. It's conscious awareness and the factors that influence your thinking. So for example, me asking you, why did you have a bad day? You're going to start to think about that and then think about why that was a bad day, and maybe some of the actions that you did or what you said, and you start to kind of metacognitively go through your day and become more aware of maybe what really happened in each moment. Merchant 2001 believes that metacognitive skills are components of thinking that are as applicable to the thinking of the teacher as they are to students. So again, a really great thing that I see a lot of teachers do are think alouds. You know, so if we're going through something, the solving of a math problem, you know, something in science, something in reading. As you know, I have a literacy background, so that's what I focus on. when you go through that process of think aloud, you actually bring power to the student. Then they start to think, oh, well, this is what she did, and this is how she thought through the problem. Let me see if I can take that same thinking on. So we're asking them to take ownership over what is your thought process as you experience new things. So the importance of reflection as an educator, a teacher who is a reflective practitioner is someone who is thoughtful, right, and has her own practice, and you reflect and you use your metacognitive skills in order to, like I said, make differences, make changes, impact others in a positive way. It is a process of inquiry. It is problem solving. So so if I'm asking somebody closed questions constantly, because, one thing I will say is it kind of would make it seem as if you don't really care. It's a closed-ended question. It's a yes or no. But if you ask open-ended questions, it shows a care and a want to know. So as a teacher, that's important, or as a parent even. Now, with that being said, though, this process of inquiry, with an open-ended question, we open up this conversation that will help students to become more aware of themselves and their actions and their thought process. And sometimes what I've noticed when I'm in schools is that students are doing the metacognitive problem-solving processes without even knowing they're doing. And so maybe we sometimes do need to bring that to a conscious awareness. It involves a combination of personal experience, theory, and research. That's kind of important when we think about reflection and when we think about our own thought process. So in life, what I have found is that interpretation and perspective play a large role in how things will unroll. So when a decision is made or something is being asked of you, if your background information and your experiences are a certain thing, you may perceive the situation differently than somebody else. Actually, typically that is what happens. And so it's really important at times to continue to build our knowledge base. As students, as parents, as teachers, we want to build our knowledge base so we can actually pull information from there, bring it to the forefront, and be able to continuously evolve as learners, teachers, parents. The reflective practitioner creates new knowledge through experimentation and reflection. So here's the thing with that one. As a practitioner, which is what everybody here would be, a reflective person, you are not going to reflect and come out with the exact right answer. Like I said, because of background information or your own knowledge base, you may actually reflect on something, think it's going to work, and it's not. It's almost like a science of inquiry itself. But what you need to do is realize that's okay and then try it again. It's a process. And that's what we're asking our students to do. Take the time, give yourself time to actually sit back and look at the day. Super important as a reflector as a person of reflection. Reflection can be viewed as continuous interaction between the interrelated elements of action and knowledge. I kind of already shared that. Reflective practitioners engage in reflection on action and reflection in action. And I'm going to bring that back up later on, right before I read aloud. So I'm not going to talk about it too much here. But the idea is that it is cyclical in the fact that you are always reflecting on what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and then you're going to do it. What happens? What's the reflection process in the moment? And then afterwards, how did I do? So an effective decision maker is one who is able to ask the questions why, act and react based on observation and reflection, consciously strives to become a more effective reflective practitioner, and has 4 attributes of effective decision making in regards to the developmental process within various contexts. So as I speak to all of you, and we're thinking about the students in the classroom at the high school level, we actually want them, what I just shared there is what we would want them to be able to do when they leave high school and go into the real world, even if it's just a little more depth in their thought process, a little bit more of, wait, let me step back for a second and think about this. I do think about, like I said, I'm in a ton of schools, and when I go in, sometimes students will outburst. That will happen. This is more behavioral. So why is it happening? So as an instructor, that's what you should be asking yourself. Why is this happening? Did I say something? Don't blame the student for their action. You need to think about your approach. In the student's case, though, they need to realize the behavior wasn't appropriate. So they need you to help them with dealing with coping skills. How do you do that? Well, you start with open-ended questions, right? You have to ask the student, why did this happen? Why do you think the teacher said what she said? And then how can we make this different? What can we do? And then we start to collaborate together and create an understanding, and then also help them with coping with situations a little differently. We build their understanding and their background. So important. So as I said, for, in, and on action, I mentioned that one in a bullet 2 slides ago. So for action, that is before your instruction. We can even compare this to your day. It's like before you go into work or before you go to school. You know, and you start to think about your day or what's to come, you know, that type of thing. But please remember, and this is something that is more psychology than anything else. If we think too far ahead, we create anxiety. If we think too far back, we become depressed. So you want to stay in the moment, but at the same time, you need to have some type of idea of, you know, how you're going to approach the day, especially as a teacher. So you're planning out whatever it is that you're going to be teaching, and then in action, so you've planned this beautiful lesson, you put it into play, and you're in action, and you're noticing that the students aren't listening. So it's like one of those things when I'm doing a webinar where I'm sitting here like, I wish I could see if they're nodding their heads or are they following me at all. But I don't have that opportunity. So, but you do. So whenever you go and you see, you know, are your students following along? Are they glazing over? If they're glazing over, you need to know what to do. You need to know how to turn that. If we are starting to see more behaviors happening, guess what? We got to stop for a second and reflect. It's almost like that area in reflection that you want to be able to pause the button and then think about it and then unpause and bring it back together. Unfortunately, that's not possible. So inaction is one of the areas in my research that showed the hardest thing to do for teachers. It's even hard for everybody in life, truly. When you're in a situation and something happens and you react, I can guarantee there are times you've reflected back and thought, oh my gosh, I could have done that so different. Or maybe you said, hey, I did pretty well for the situation I was in. That's that inaction piece. On action is when, like I said, when we look back and we think about what we did and how that affected the environment of which we were in. And then we go back up to planning for the next time. So that's kind of the way for, in, and on action works. Super important to understand this piece because it's everything that we do. At least it's everything we should be doing. When we think about asking students questions to extend to their thought process, and like I said, it can be in any area. It can be in behaviors, it can be academically, it can be in life. It's all about your question, truly. It is about your conversation and that feeling that you actually care. And so that happens with an open-ended question. So what you see in front of you, this is actually, so again, I mind you, I am a literacy person, but to me, every teacher, every person is a person or teacher of literacy. And I say that because if you think about literacy, it's speaking, it is writing, it is listening, it is thinking. And when you think of it that way, how can you not say that you're not a person of literacy? You are. So as a teacher, if you're listening, then you need to realize that I am a teacher of literacy. And so Faunus and Pinnell are actually researchers in the area of comprehensive literacy. And what that is kind of understanding our students and being able to figure out where they're at, analyze that, and then start to approach them in the way that's necessary to move them forward as individuals. It's very difficult to do, especially when we have large classrooms. But what I can tell you is it is doable. I used this process with my students when I was a classroom teacher. And I somewhat use it now, but I teach more online, so it's a little trickier. But what I do is, you just have to figure out your students first and then move them forward. In order to do that and see where they are in their thought process, these open-ended questions, as you see at the top, it's thinking within the text. So let's just say that's thinking within life. And those are the type of questions that are more literal, okay? So if I was reading a book and, the book said that the sky is blue, I might say to the students, what color was the sky? Again, a closed question because they're only going to answer with one word. But that's the literal thought of it. As you move to the red area, that area would be considered beyond the text. So this is when we start to take students to a more in-depth way of thinking. So think Bloom's taxonomy in a sense. So here we want them to be predicting and synthesizing and even inferring. So, you know, that question, we start to open those up and it becomes more open-ended in a sense, especially with inference. It's always an interesting one to hit on with students, but it's definitely one that they need to be aware of. Read between the lines. Again, true in life and true in reading. So again, literacy, connecting to the life aspect. The last one is this is the purple part. This is your most in-depth types of questions, would be with the analysis and critiquing of a story or of something else. And what this is more so being like, okay, you know, now why do you think the author wrote the book in this way? Would be a kind of question that you could ask that would meet one of those criteria. With that, what is your thinking? Within, beyond, and about. So this matches what Fontes and Pennell did, but here we have a list of questions. So if you look within the text, very, very literal questions, you know. What was the problem in the story? So what was the problem in the story? The students can answer that question probably pretty easily, depending on what the type of story it was. Beyond the text, where we start to think more in depth, we might ask them, what lesson do the characters learn? And even though that question is closed, so what do the characters learn? They learn not to be mean. Okay, why do you think that? And the students can then extend on our thoughts, and they have to give some type of evidence for their thinking. That's again true in behaviors too, right? So why do you think somebody did that? And then they're going to answer, and then you're going to say, okay, so now why might that not have been a good choice? Or how could you have gone towards that a little differently? About the text, again, more critical, so you can ask a question like, why do you think this picture was used? So now they're looking at the illustrations in the text, and now we're thinking about the author's intention, and we're thinking, okay, well, why would that picture be used in this story? How does it match what the words are saying? So the definition of closed reading, for closed reading, this is the activity we're going to do today. So close reading is actually that moment where we just take a minute, like actually kind of, if we're thinking about reading, we're going to take a little paragraph or something within the text that we think is powerful and have a conversation about it. And the reason we would do that is to help the students kind of really get engaged with what's happening. Remember, in literacy or in reading specifically, which is what we're looking at here, when we do any type of story or read aloud or guided reading, or if they're reading a novel, or if they can't read at all but you're reading to them, the idea here is that we begin to help students build. Remember that background knowledge I was talking about earlier? That's what we're helping them build. And so you might be asking yourself, well, how? How is that happening? Well, it's happening because as we introduce new characters and new behaviors within text, the students can start to make some type of connection to that. Whether it's somebody that they know that's done that, whether they've done it themselves, and then we can see the outcome in a story, right? So it's kind of like those social stories, if you're familiar. Most likely many of you have used those. But there's such a power behind it when you think about the connections that students can make between the characters in the story and their own lives. And that's such an important component. So in close reading, what we do is we actually really minimize any of the outside stuff, and we just go right into one simple paragraph, and we start to ask students more specific questions. So this is a process of transformation. And so what we do is we strive for change and we seek clarity, right? So that's a big thing. Conscious efforts versus reactive responses, again, through book, through story, we can actually help students become more conscious of what they're doing and how they're reacting in every aspect of their life. It does help with goal setting as well. So of course, if you're like, you know, something's going on, you might want to set some goals and try to see if you can exceed those goals or meet those goals. Reflection helps in that situation, by the way, because you can always go back and kind of figure out what could I do differently, and then reset your goals. Remember, nothing is perfect. Life is not perfect. We are always working on transforming. We're always working on reflecting. We're always working on becoming the best version of ourselves. Through that, we would then extend that to our students. It is process and work though, right? So we have to be aware of ourselves, aware of what we're saying, aware of situations, and we have to have conversations with people open-ended, not closed. And don't be ashamed to be a little vulnerable. I'm not sure if you've watched the TED Talk. So I'm just going to drop. I could have shown it to you here, but it's like an hour and 10 minutes. But it's on Netflix, and it's Brené Brown. You might be familiar with her, but she talks with this idea of vulnerability. And many times, whenever you open questions up to students, an open question where you actually are asking for their thought, that is a vulnerable place sometimes for students to be. And so it's so important to create that environment of being risk takers and being okay and knowing they're in a safe place. I think I've said this in every one of my webinars, and this is my third one. So I always say the importance of that connection. I think my first webinar I talked about be a champion. And in being a champion, you are creating a space for students, a space for people that is safe and that they're not being judged. Kind of the feeling that you want is what you would create for your students. And you would step back and be able to maybe, if a situation's getting above you and you're getting irritated, we know that we need to step back from it and go back later. But all right, so I could keep going at that. But check out the Brené Brown thing if you haven't. I wonder if I'll get paid for saying that. But anyway, vulnerability, that's what happens when we ask those open-ended questions. So be ready for that if this is not something that the students are used to. You need to be able to understand that their thought processes might be a little bit different depending on their background information or prior knowledge. What we are, transformation, we're looking for positive outcomes. So if a student does finally participate, share thoughts, do that type of thing, and it's not right in quotation marks, then we never judge that. We pull something from it, and then we continue forward, and we help them in creating a deeper understanding of whatever that might be. So here's the story for today. This is your entertainment. It is called The Sign Painter by Alan Say. Now, I will tell you that as I presented at the International Literacy Association, I actually read this story to that audience as well. And nobody knew the story, which was really quite interesting to me because it is a text exemplar according to the Common Core standards. So all of you are probably aware that there was a such thing as Common Core standards. And this was one that was listed, and amazingly for third grade. Now, those of you that might be teaching in higher grades, which I believe all of you would be, I never trust that, because no matter what you are reading to students, it can either, depending on your questioning method, so earlier when I showed you that wheel, and also those questions in that little chart, you can make any book worthwhile at any grade. So this book, although for third grade, you could read it to kindergarten, for sure. And you can read it to 12th graders and have a conversation. And I'll tell you what, I should have held off on this because I have a webinar coming up about how to help students as they leave high school. What should we be doing? And with that, this book would have been great. So I think we can maybe tie that in today to get us ready for the next webinar. So, all right, so read aloud stories are a great way for us to start to make connections and start to think about what's to come in our own lives. So this is The Sign Painter. Alan Say is the author. You might be familiar with Alan Say possibly. And here goes our story. So what I want you to do when you read aloud to students, or at any point when you're reading to students, or if you even have them reading, it's like a movie. That's what I tell students. So you're going to read it the first time and you're going to catch on to the big idea, most likely. Then you watch it again, a movie. Same movie, but all of a sudden you're picking up on different things. And then if you take a couple years off, by the way, and then you watch the movie again and you've lived some life, all of a sudden you're seeing a whole different story. So it's pretty impactful. So the first thing you want to do is you always want to read for somewhat enjoyment. As you read for enjoyment, though, always share your think alouds. Like, what are you thinking? What questions are going through your brain? And then the second time you read it, you might do more of that close reading, which we will be doing today. And then the third time you read it, you might go into that really deep talk about the text. Why would the author do this? What about the craft? How did he do this? See the question marks and that type of thing. So let's get started because I'm sure you're ready to hear the story. So here we go. That morning, only one passenger got off the early bus. He seemed quite young, rubbing his eyes as though trying to shake off sleep or find out where he was. He looked down the empty street with dark storefronts on both sides and gave a sigh. Not even the coffee shop was open. When he turned the other way, where the bus had gone, and saw a lighted window 2 blocks away, he crossed the street. When he came to it, he saw that it was a sign shop, and through the window he could see a man working inside. He hesitated, then straightened and tapped on the glass. The man looked up, stared for a moment, and beckoned with a nod. The young man walked in. If I was thinking aloud right now, I'd be like, wow, pretty brave boy that he has no idea where he's at, and he's just going to walk into some place. So are you lost, son? The man asked. Yes, no, I need a job, the young man stammered, looking not much more than a boy. Tell me what you can do. I can paint. Ah, an artist. Are you good at faces? I think so. Can you paint them big? Yes. All right, I'm interested. The man put down the brush and said, come with me. They drove to a vacant lot where a blank billboard had been set up. This is your model, the man said, showing the boy a picture of a woman. I want her on the right, as big as you can make her. The boy worked quickly. He outlined a face taller than himself, then began to paint. At lunchtime, the man said, you seem to know what you're doing. In the late afternoon, a large white car drove up. As the sign painter walked toward it, and the back window rolled down, and he spoke to someone inside. After a while, an envelope was handed to him, and the car drove away. He was flushed when he said to the boy, how would you like to work on a dozen billboards? That's interesting, isn't it? All of a sudden the car would stop, and now there's a dozen billboards to be painted. I wonder why his face was flushed. They started out early the following morning. We'll be working in the desert, the man said. I like painting landscapes, the boy said. You're painting a woman, just the way the layout shows. Goes with one word, Aerostar. That's it. What is Aerostar? I didn't ask, replied the man. By mid-afternoon, they were driving into the desert. Later that day, they came to the first job site. Now there's a canvas for you, the man said. It'll be like painting a mural, the boy said. But who's going to see it way out here? That's not our problem, the man said. They spent 3 days on the first board and moved on to the next. They set up a tent and cooked the beans over fire. How does it feel to be a wage earner, the man asked. I'm a painter, the boy replied. We all have dreams. What made you want to be a painter? It's what I love. But you found out you had to make a living. Yes. We'll make a good team. You won't go hungry. But the boy didn't answer. As time went on, they spoke less, as if their voices would disturb the silence around them. Only the landscape changed. Then one day, the boy said, how many more? Are you tired? The man asked. I'm not tired. What's bothering you then? I keep wondering. Who will know the difference if I paint mountains in the background, even just a cloud? Son, when someone pays you to paint a woman, will you give him a landscape? And the boy looked away. But right now, I do want you thinking about the characters in the story, the boy and the man, because there is something happening here. And we will be talking about this at the end, so I want you to think about it. They went on, setting up and breaking down the tent, moving on to yet another blank signboard. So the morning when the man announced, one more to go, the boy said, one more what? The man laughed, but a wind came up, and they were caught in a raging dust storm. They rolled up the windows and spent the night sitting up in the truck. Sometime before dawn, the wind died. The man turned to the ignition, and as the engine sputtered to life, they sighed with relief. But when the last billboard came into sight, they rubbed their blurry eyes. Only the skeleton of it was left standing. The panels had been blown away and were nowhere to be seen. I don't know if we can fix this, he grumbled. The boy looked off toward the horizon. Watch out, the boy shouted. The man leapt backward. The swerving car barely missed him. It's the Aerostar woman, the boy cried. What is she doing out here? She came from those towers. Couldn't be oil wells. Let's have a look. Approaching the looming towers, the man said, that must be Aerostar. What can they be? The boy asked. The man stepped hard on the brakes. It's a roller coaster. They stared in silence. Then the boy pointed at a smaller mesa, which had houses on top. But why out here, he asked. I wonder, the man said. Maybe the road will lead us to the answer. They drove on, staring in amazement at the sight before them. An immense curtain hung in the sky, and under that a cluster of houses nested on a rock, as if floating on a cloud. From there, a long ramp sloped down to the desert floor. The man eased the truck onto the ramp. They pulled into a lot at the top and got out. The boy followed the man into the narrow streets. They peered into gaping windows of empty houses with not a single piece of furniture inside. The only sound came from their footsteps. Seems strange. Suddenly they stopped. Someone was walking or talking nearby. The man put his finger to his lips, and the two followed the boy to an open archway. Imagine it! All lit up at night. A man in a white suit was talking on the telephone. Had the name for years, before any of the building was done. The whole thing was riding on the highway coming through. Who knows? But we'll advertise. Billboards. We can only hope. Nah, she left. Couldn't wait, she said. The sign painter pulled the boy away from the archway. That should have you all thinking right now, that conversation. They coasted down the ramp. Neither said a word until Aerostar was behind them. Will he succeed? The man asked. Gosh, I hope so, the boy answered. Goes to show that dreams come in all sizes. But we're done for now. How do you feel about working with me? The boy said nothing. Look, there's a cloud you wanted to paint. Even has a frame around it. The boy turned to look. There it goes, just passing by, like you and me, and the builder of Aerostar. Good luck to him. The next day before sunset, they were back in the shop. It was late when the boy said goodbye to the sign painter, and as the last bus came around the corner, he said softly to the empty street, just passing by. And that is the end of our story of the sign painter. What you should have a lot of thoughts going through your mind. So as we went through the story, I tried to kind of stop a little bit and share, like, when I was a little bit surprised, maybe some of my thoughts, not all of them. But as we read this story, my next question to you is to think about, what was the story about? What was this story really about? I want you just to think about that for a moment. The sign painter. What was the story really about? I guess the moral of the story. So The Sign Painter by Alan Say, it is about dreams and choices, change and new experiences, determination and perseverance. So did you pull that from the story? Many of you may have, and some of you may not have. Maybe, it's all about setting up the stage. In this case, we read the story just simply to figure out, what is the story about? Now that we've read the story and we kind of get an idea that it's about dreams and choices, change and new experiences, determination and perseverance, and I think as I'm saying that, I bet now you're picking up on those things if you haven't already. That the boy had dreams, right? But did the man? Did the man at one point have a dream? Did he? And then did he have to make a choice? So as we go through the next part of this, I'm going to bring you into a close reading type experience. And there you're going to get a feel for how I can start to ask students more questions to maybe clarify some really special meanings. It's like, I think that one slide said, it's like going into the skeleton. It's figuring out what's around it now. Okay, and this is just the Common Core standards. You know what, I put this in there so that way it's evident that these do follow standards. This is, again, for third grade Common Core. Everybody's kind of working off their own thing now. But either way, if you look at it, determine the meaning of words and phrases, distinguish the point of view, and explain specific aspects of the text illustrations. So these are still standards no matter what standards you're using. And curricularly, truly, the conversation should be based somewhat around things such as this. So open-ended questions again, these encourage a full, meaningful answer using the subject's own knowledge and or feelings. And then the closed question, which encourages a short or single word answer. We are staying away from closed-ended questions as I take you through this next part. Or I might say a closed-ended question, but then I might follow it up with an open-ended, so that way we extend our thought process. So I want to take us back to the beginning of the story, and actually in front of you now, that's the picture, the illustration of the truck. This is when they're off to start the billboards, and here is the actual writing from the text. So I'm going to read it to you again, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So I want you to really think about, as I'm reading this, why the boy may not have replied to the man. So they started out early the following morning. We'll be working in the desert, the man said. I like painting landscapes, the boy said. You're painting a woman, just the way the layout shows. Goes with one word, Aerostar. That's it. What is Aerostar? I didn't ask, replied the man. By mid-afternoon, they were driving into the desert. So with students, I bring them back to this part because this starts to set the stage about the man and the boy. So why would the man not ask what Aerostar is? Why would the man not ask what Aerostar is to his client? So an answer might be said, again, that's somewhat of a closed, so why do you think that would be my next one, my next question, to extend the thought? What I could have said if I was going closed and really don't want to know would be, well, okay, so where are they heading? To the desert. Okay, good job. Not good. So we want to continue to extend their thought process. So I'm picking something out specifically that I feel will help students to better understand the people in the story. Therefore, better understanding the people they're going to run into in life, right? So in this case, we don't know why he didn't ask the man about Aerostar yet. But what we do know is that the boy is sharing that he likes to paint landscapes. And the man quickly says, you're painting a woman, just like that. And so you figure here we start to see a difference in the two characters. Later that day, they came to the first job site. Now there's a canvas for you, the man said. It'll be like a painting a mural, the boy said. But who's going to see it way out here? Not our problem, the man said. So again, if we look at these characters, the boy is like, oh, it's like painting a mural. You know, there's probably excitement in his voice. We don't know that because it's in writing, but as I read it to you, you hear the excitement in mine. And as we go further, that's not our problem, the man said. Now, why would he answer in that way? What do you think? So there would be your question that maybe you would ask. Again, I do have a habit of asking, what do you think? Or if we were to think about this, we could definitely look at this idea. Let me see here. This idea of the boy that actually enjoys painting murals, because when we look at that piece right there, that actually might help us understand the ending when he says, I'm just passing by. So you build your story, you build what it is you want your students to know. And as you do a close reading such as this, you know, when you're pulling that information that's going to help them later, you decide what part of that you're actually going to focus on. For me, I think it's the boy and the man, so we can begin to understand those two. But for you, it might be this idea of the boy's dream, which was to be a painter. The other thing you can work on in close reading is obviously punctuation. Why is there a comma after now? You know, those types of things. So just another little tip there for close reading, the way that the author set up the words. All right, so here we go. How does it feel to be a wage earner? Oh, this is a big one. Actually, this page is a big one. So listen very carefully to this conversation between the man and the boy, because here is where you start to see the divide. Here's where you start to see a little bit more about the man himself. So how does it feel to be a wage earner, the man asked. I'm a painter, the boy replied. We all have dreams. What made you want to paint? It's what I love. But you found out you had to make a living. Yes. We'll make a good team. You won't go hungry. The boy did not answer. So if I were to take you back up to where he says, we all have dreams, and then the boy says, it's what I love, and the man says, but you found out you had to make a living. Does that tell you anything more about the man? question I just asked is it's closed. So yes or no? Does that actually help us understand the man more? Yes, it really does. So why? Why does it help us understand him more? What did we just learn from this right here? What can we infer? What can we take from this? And then the students can start to discuss, well, he says about the dreams, but then you can tell it sounds like the man had a dream at one point, but then realized that he had to make a living. And so he made a choice. And his choice was to become this person that just does what other people come to do so he can actually live. Where the boy is still, it's almost like you could say, if I was going to go really in depth with you on a side note, it's almost like you could say this boy was the man. Think about it. Because this boy still has his dreams, where the man gave his up. And for good reason. So, I don't know. All right, what's bothering you then? I keep wondering, who'll know the difference if I put mountains in the background, even just a cloud? Son, when someone pays you to paint a woman, will you give him a landscape? The boy looked away. So again, here, it's just kind of reiterating the difference, right? So the boy is still saying, but I have a dream, like this is not what I want to do. So why would the man make that final comment? When someone pays you to paint a woman, will you give him a landscape? Why? Why would he respond to the boy that way? And we begin to, again, build the understanding that the man had given up his dream, possibly, and became a wage earner. This one here is pretty powerful because this kind of brings everything together. As you go through the story and we begin to learn about the man, we begin to learn about the boy, we start to realize that there truly was dreams and there truly were choices made. And there are continuing in life, we will continue to make choices, right? So either we're going to follow our dream, or in this case, the cloud passing by, or we're going to stop and we're just going to stay. And there's comfort to that. So, you know, that this page is extremely important for students to understand, especially if you have high school students that are going to be going out into the world. They have a decision to make. And even, you know, even students that might struggle as learners, guess what? They still have a decision to make. So this is a powerful page. So look, there's the cloud you wanted to paint, even has a frame around it. The boy turned to look. There it goes, just passing by like you and me. And the builder of Aerostar, good luck to him. So here, I'm going to start to ask the students, so as I just shared with you the power of this picture, I want them to get there, right? So I'm going to ask them, why is this a significant picture? What is it about this picture that actually tells us what this story truly means? I might even, so this is where I can bring the illustration in, because I might even say to them, so do you notice that there's a bigger cloud and a smaller cloud? I wonder if there's any connection to that in the boy and the man. What do you think? Right? So I'm going to start to get them to extend deeper and think about this. So obviously at the end of the story, the boy, I'm just going to go to the end, says, just pass him by. So what does this now tell us? What does this tell us about the boy? If we know that the man might have not made, he made a choice. And I don't think it's the one that was about his dream. So in this case, what do we think about the boy now? And how do we know? And honestly, there's no right or wrong answer to this because there's no sequel. We don't know what happened to the boy. So anyway, so you can walk through a book like this, extending the thought process and the power behind this reading, and actually help students to become more, I guess, cognizant of what these choices are that somebody has to make within their lives. And all of us can relate to that in some way. So what you should have noticed, I know because I can't see you and we can't talk about it, but what you should have noticed are the things I was talking about. How by us stopping and reconnecting, we hit things that maybe we didn't notice before. We also limited it, right? I didn't read you the whole book again, but instead I kind of brought you in. And I want you to start to learn about the boy and the man. Now, when we do things like this, we can definitely, not quite ready for the survey, but I'm almost there. When we do things like this with our students again, we can certainly start to extend the thought process, right? So I might have them I could have them do a writing. I could have them maybe go into a tape recorder and record themselves, maybe on their cell phone if that's allowed at your schools. But, you know, something that extends their thought process and their connection with the boy in the story. So in all actuality, we have social stories, correct, like I talked about earlier, that help us to think a little bit deeper, to help us to build our background knowledge, to help us to answer open-ended questions and feel like risk takers. But in all actuality, every read aloud that we do helps us to do that. It helps create a deeper understanding and builds our knowledge base. So that's the power behind an open-ended question. It is also the power behind being reflective. And it is also the power behind problem solving and critical thought. Our goal, as I showed you at the beginning, is to never have a student or even ourselves stuck on an escalator. The only way to do that is to continue to build our knowledge and continue to learn about the way people work, decisions that are made, and how we can become better. So I want to thank you all for being here today, or as you watch this, whenever you have the opportunity. And if you have any comments or questions, I am always available to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fudadio, for a wonderful presentation today. Some great ideas and some situations where we can help with supporting staff in the classroom with these kind of open-ended questions, and using literacy as an example is wonderful. So we really appreciate your expertise and presentation today.
Thank you.